Aliens poisoned the human soldier, she took a nap, then the alien queen watched them fall. The needle broke against her skin. Lieutenant Sarah Chen watched the Vrexian interrogator step back, mandibles clicking in confusion. The syringe hung from her forearm, bent at an impossible angle, the neurotoxin still sealed inside the shattered glass chamber. Around her, the containment cell hummed with alien machinery, all of it designed to keep humans compliant. Broken. She'd been their prisoner for 16 hours. They'd stripped her uniform, taken her weapons, and chained her to a wall that pulsed with some kind of sedative frequency. The Vrexians had been so confident. Their intelligence said humans were fragile.
Weak. Easy to break.
The interrogator tried again with a fresh syringe. This time Sarah didn't bother watching. She could feel her body responding to the intrusion, her metabolism shifting into combat mode. The needle bent. The toxin stayed contained. Impossible, the Vrexian hissed in its clicking language. Sarah understood every word. The translation implant they'd forced into her skull worked both ways, though they didn't know she'd figured out how to access their communications network through it. She closed her eyes, let her breathing slow. The Vrexians had made one critical mistake in their assessment of humanity. They'd tested their poisons on human colonists, farmers' children, civilians whose bodies had never been pushed past normal limits. They'd never captured a soldier, never seen what military augmentation could do, never understood what happened when you cornered something that refused to die. The cell door opened. A larger Vrexian entered, its carapace marked with the geometric patterns of high rank. It gestured dismissively at the interrogator, then turned its compound eyes toward Sarah. She met its gaze without flinching. "You are resilient," it said. "This changes our timeline. The invasion fleet expected minimal resistance. Your biology is more robust than our projections indicated. Let it talk. Let it reveal. The toxin was designed to collapse your neural pathways within seconds. You should be convulsing, dying. Yet your vital signs suggest mild discomfort at most." The commander tilted its head. "Tell me how this is possible, and your death will be swift." The word hung in the recycled air. Simple. Final. The commander's mandibles spread in what might have been amusement. Defiance. How predictable. "Very well. We will proceed with the original plan. Your fleet will arrive at the Gamma Station in approximately 6 hours. They will find it occupied. They will attempt negotiation, and they will be destroyed when our battle carriers emerge from behind the station's debris field." Sarah's heart rate didn't change. Her breathing stayed steady. But inside, calculations ran at combat speed. 6 hours. A trap. Her people walking into an ambush because one lieutenant was stupid enough to get captured during a reconnaissance run. The commander waited for a reaction. When none came, it turned toward the door. "You may keep your silence. It serves no purpose now. Rest, human. Your last hours should not be spent in pain." The door sealed. The lights dimmed to a twilight glow. Sarah listened to the retreating footsteps, counted the seconds until they faded completely, then opened her eyes. The augmentation package she'd received wasn't standard military issue. It was experimental, classified. Designed for deep reconnaissance operatives who might spend months behind enemy lines without support. Her body could process toxins, survive on minimal resources, and operate at peak efficiency with almost no rest. But it came with one critical requirement. Every 72 hours, her system needed to purge the accumulated stress hormones and cellular damage. The process looked like sleep. The military called it a reset cycle. Sarah called it the one vulnerability she couldn't eliminate. She was already 40 hours past due. Her hands trembled, just slightly, the first warning sign. In another 8 hours, her body would force the shutdown whether she wanted it or not. She'd collapse into a coma-like state for approximately 4 hours while her enhanced metabolism repaired itself. Completely vulnerable, utterly defenseless. The Vrexians thought she was resting by choice. They had no idea she was fighting to stay conscious, fighting to find a way out before biology overrode determination. Sarah tested the restraints. Chromium alloy, keyed to respond only to Vrexian biosignatures. She couldn't break them. Couldn't slip them. But the wall mounting was different. It had been installed hastily, drilled into the ship's secondary hull rather than the primary structure. She pulled. Gently at first, then with increasing force. The mounting groaned. Metal fatigue from rapid installation. If she could generate enough force at the right angle, the wall shuddered. Dust trickled from the bolt holes. Sarah's vision blurred. She blinked it clear, focused through the exhaustion creeping through her nervous system. Her body was screaming for the reset. every cell demanding rest. She had maybe 6 hours left before the collapse. 6 hours to break free, sabotage the ambush, and save her fleet. 6 hours to prove the Vrexians had made a fatal error in underestimating what humans could endure. She pulled again. The mounting gave another millimeter. Outside her cell, the Vrexian warship hummed toward the killing field they'd prepared. Inside, Sarah Chen began counting seconds, measuring her remaining strength, and planning exactly how she'd make them regret every assumption they'd made about her species. The interrogator had been wrong about the poison. They were about to be wrong about everything else, too. Sarah caught herself before hitting the floor, chains dragging behind her as she moved to the cell door. The restraint still bound her wrists, but her hands were free to work. She pressed her palm against the access panel, felt it reject her biosignature, then slammed her elbow into the corner where the panel met the wall. The impact sent shockwaves through her arm. The panel cracked. Behind it, crystalline circuitry pulsed with alien light. She'd watched the interrogator enter the access code, 17 keystrokes in a specific pattern. The Vrexians relied on complex sequences because their minds processed information differently than humans. What took them seconds of calculation was impossible for most species to memorize. Sarah's fingers moved across the exposed circuits. Touch, touch, skip, skip, touch. The pattern emerged from memory, enhanced by military neural optimization. The door hissed open. The corridor beyond was empty. Third watch rotation. The Vrexians operated on a 20-hour cycle, and she'd tracked their patterns through the bulkhead vibrations. 2 guards stationed at the intersection 70 meters ahead. 4 crew members in the engineering section below. The command deck would have a full complement, but they'd be focused on preparing for the ambush. She moved left, away from the guard post, chains wrapped around her forearms to minimize noise. Her vision swam. Hour 44. The trembling in her hands was constant now. Soon it would spread to her legs, her core, until coordination became impossible. The service shaft was where the schematics suggested. She'd spent her conscious hours mapping the ship through sound and vibration, building a mental image of its layout. Vrexian design philosophy favored redundancy. Every system had a backup, every corridor a maintenance access. They built for reliability, not security. They'd never needed to worry about prisoners escaping. Sarah squeezed into the shaft, pulling herself up using pipes that burned cold against her skin. The Vrexians maintained their ships at temperatures humans found uncomfortable. Another advantage they thought they had, another assumption that worked against them. The cold helped. It sharpened her focus, pushed back the exhaustion for a few more minutes. The shaft opened into an equipment bay. Medical supplies lined the walls in crystalline containers. Sarah scanned them, looking for anything useful. The Vrexians used organic technology, growing their tools rather than manufacturing them. Half the containers held things she couldn't identify. The other half were clearly weapons. She took a cutting torch designed for emergency hull repairs. It would work on flesh as well as metal. Then she found what she needed in a container marked with biohazard symbols. Stimulants. The Vrexians used them to keep crews alert during extended combat operations. The compound was designed for Vrexian biology. It might kill her. It would definitely interact badly with her augmentation package.
But it would buy her time.
Sarah pressed the injector against her neck. The stimulant hit her system like lightning. Her heart rate spiked. Her vision cleared to crystal sharpness. The trembling stopped. She had maybe 2 hours before the crash. When it came, it would be catastrophic. Her body would shut down completely, the augmentation package overriding everything to force the reset cycle, but 2 hours was enough. The communication hub was 3 decks up. She moved through the ship like smoke, using maintenance shafts and service corridors, avoiding the crew through timing and careful observation. The Vrexians moved in predictable patterns. Didn't improvise well. Didn't adapt quickly to unexpected situations. Sarah reached the hub at hour 45. The room was small, packed with organic circuitry that pulsed with bioluminescent light. A single technician sat at the control station, monitoring the fleet communications. She waited until its attention focused on a priority message, then moved. The cutting torch activated with a whisper. The technician died without making a sound. Sarah caught the body before it fell, lowered it gently to the floor, then took its place at the console. The Vrexian communication network spread out before her, a living web of information. She could see everything. The battle carriers hiding behind Gamma Station's debris field. The invasion fleet holding position 3 systems away, the ground forces preparing to deploy once the human fleet was destroyed. And she could see the command codes, the authentication protocols, everything she needed to tear their careful plans apart. Sarah's fingers moved across the organic interface. The system resisted at first, but the translation implant in her skull gave her access to the command language. She typed in Vrexian, mimicking the patterns she'd observed, and the network accepted her input. First, she sent a message to the battle carriers. Priority Alpha. Emergency redeployment. A human scout fleet had been detected in the adjacent system. All stealth assets were to break position and investigate immediately. The authentication code came from the commander's personal sequence, lifted from the communication traffic she'd monitored. The battle carriers acknowledged. Sarah watched them begin their movement on the tactical display, pulling away from their ambush positions. Second, she accessed the jamming systems designed to block human communications. She couldn't shut them down without triggering alerts, but she could modify their frequency range. Shift them just enough that human military encryption would slip through while the Vrexians thought the jamming was still effective. Third, she prepared a data packet. Everything she'd learned about Vrexian fleet movements, tactical doctrine, technological capabilities. She compressed it into a burst transmission and aimed it at the frequency her fleet used for emergency protocols. Her hand started shaking again. The stimulant was wearing off faster than expected. Her augmentation package was fighting it, trying to force the reset cycle, and the conflict was tearing her metabolism apart. Sarah sent the transmission. Watched it lance out into space toward Gamma Station. The human fleet would receive it in approximately 90 minutes.
They'd have the intelligence they needed to counter the ambush.
They'd win. Alarms erupted throughout the ship. She'd been detected. The Vrexians had traced the unauthorized transmissions back to the communication hub. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Sarah stood, picked up the cutting torch, positioned herself beside the door. Her vision was fragmenting now, her enhanced reflexes stuttering as her body began the shutdown sequence. She had minutes left, maybe less. The door opened. 6 guards rushed in, weapons raised. Sarah moved through them like a ghost, the cutting torch drawing lines of light through chitin and flesh. 2 fell. The 4th got a shot off that burned across her ribs. She killed it anyway. The last 2 hesitated. That was their mistake. Sarah didn't hesitate anymore. Couldn't afford to. When it was over, she stood among the bodies, breathing hard, blood running down her side where the energy weapon had caught her. The wound wasn't fatal. Wasn't even serious by combat standards. But it didn't matter. Her legs buckled. The reset cycle had begun. She felt her consciousness pulling away, her body taking control, forcing her down. Sarah managed 3 more steps toward the corridor before she collapsed. The last thing she heard was more guards approaching. The last thing she thought was that it didn't matter. The message was sent. Her fleet would survive. The mission was complete. Then the darkness took her, and Lieutenant Sarah Chen fell into the deep reset sleep that her body demanded, surrounded by enemies who thought they'd finally broken her. They still didn't understand. Humans didn't break. The Vrexian Queen arrived at hour 62. Sarah woke to the sound of crystal chimes, her body still locked in the recovery cycle, but her mind beginning to surface. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely breathe, but she could hear, could see through slitted eyes as the cell door opened and something massive entered. The Queen was 3 times the size of any Vrexian Sarah had encountered. Her carapace glowed with bioluminescent patterns that shifted like oil on water, and her presence filled the room with a weight that had nothing to do with physical mass. 4 royal guards flanked her, their weapons trained on Sarah's prone form. "Fascinating," the Queen said. Her voice resonated at multiple frequencies, making the walls hum. "The human that killed 17 of my warriors and sabotaged my invasion fleet. I expected something more impressive than this broken creature." Sarah's metabolism was working frantically to complete the reset. Another hour, maybe 2, then she'd be at full capability again. But the Queen wouldn't wait that long, wouldn't take the chance. "My science cast analyzed your biology during your unconsciousness," the Queen continued, circling Sarah's paralyzed body. "The augmentation package is remarkable. Crude but effective. Your species has found ways to exceed your natural limitations. Admirable. Ultimately futile, but admirable." One of the guards stepped forward. "Shall we execute her, Radiance?" "Not yet. I want her conscious for what comes next." The Queen's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The human fleet received her transmission. They altered their approach vector, deployed additional screening vessels, and activated their full sensor array. Our ambush failed. 3 battle carriers were destroyed when they broke stealth to investigate the false scout fleet report. The invasion has been delayed by weeks. Sarah felt a flicker of satisfaction. Weeks meant reinforcements, meant preparation, meant the Vrexians had lost their advantage. One soldier, the Queen said. One unremarkable human caused all of this. Do you know what that tells me, Lieutenant Chen? They'd been monitoring her neural patterns during the reset cycle, reading her memories, pulling information directly from her unconscious mind. It tells me we underestimated your species. Again. The Queen moved closer. We studied your colonists. Your civilians. We thought we understood human limitations. But soldiers are different, aren't they? You've been enhanced. Modified. Pushed beyond natural parameters. Sarah's finger twitched. The reset was nearly complete. She could feel strength returning to her limbs, sensation flooding back through her nervous system. The Vrexians hadn't restrained her properly. They thought she was still hours from recovery. I'm going to make an example of you, the Queen said. When your fleet arrives to negotiate for your return, I'm going to show them what happens to humans who resist. I'm going to dissect you piece by piece while keeping you conscious. Your screams will be broadcast across every frequency. Your people will understand the cost of defiance. Sarah's eyes opened fully. Met the Queen's compound gaze, saw the moment recognition flared there. The instant the Queen understood her mistake, Sarah moved. The chains she'd been fitted with during unconsciousness were standard restraints, not designed for combat augmentation. She snapped them like thread, rolling aside as energy weapons discharged where she'd been lying. The cutting torch was gone, but the guards had left their weapons within reach. Amateur mistake. Fatal mistake. She grabbed the nearest weapon. It was designed for Vrexian physiology, but the trigger mechanism was simple enough. Sarah fired 3 times. 3 guards fell. The 4th swung his blade in a wide arc. Sarah ducked under it, broke his knee with a kick, then used his own weapon to open his throat. The Queen moved faster than something her size should be able to. One massive claw caught Sarah across the chest, throwing her into the wall hard enough to crack the metal.
Pain exploded through her ribs, broken.
Multiple fractures. Her augmentation package flooded her system with endorphins and combat stimulants, pushing the pain back to manageable levels. Impressive, the Queen hissed, but insufficient. The Queen was already moving, faster than human reflexes could track, but Sarah's reflexes were no longer fully human. She led the target, adjusted for momentum, and fired. The blast caught the Queen in the shoulder, burning through chitin and flesh. The Queen screamed, not in pain, in fury. You dare. The next strike was too fast to dodge completely. Sarah took it on her left arm, felt bones shatter, and rolled with the momentum. She came up firing one-handed. The weapon burned hot in her grip. Vrexian technology, designed for their body temperature. It was scorching her palm, but she didn't let go. The Queen charged. Sarah emptied the weapon into her center mass, then dropped it and grabbed the fallen guard's blade. It was too large for human hands, awkward and unbalanced, but it was sharp. The blade caught the Queen in the throat. Not deep enough to kill, deep enough to hurt, deep enough to slow her down. Impossible! The Queen gasped, her voice breaking into harmonics. One human. One soldier. This is impossible. You keep saying that, Sarah said. She was running on empty now. The reset cycle hadn't fully completed. Her broken ribs were grinding with every breath. Her shattered arm hung useless at her side. But she was still standing, still fighting, still winning. The Queen's next attack was desperate, wild. Sarah sidestepped, drove the blade up under the carapace, and twisted. The Queen's legs buckled. She fell with a crash that shook the floor. Tell me, Sarah said, kneeling beside the dying Queen. What does this tell you about humans now? The Queen's compound eyes were dimming. That we made a mistake. That we should have studied you more carefully. That one of you is worth 100 of us. No, Sarah said. It tells you that you should have left us alone. Then went still. Sarah stood, walked to the cell door. The corridor beyond was filling with Vrexian warriors, their weapons raised, their voices raised in fury. Too many to fight, too many to escape. But the Queen was dead. The invasion was disrupted. And Sarah's message had gotten through. She raised her good hand, empty, weaponless, but defiant, uncertain. Their Queen was dead at the hands of a single human. Everything they'd been told about humanity was wrong. Then the ship shuddered. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Sarah felt the familiar vibration of human military drives. Her fleet had arrived. not to negotiate. To attack. The Vrexians had lost their queen, lost their element of surprise, and now they were about to lose everything else. Sarah smiled through the pain, through the exhaustion, through the knowledge that she'd probably die in the next few minutes. "Your move," she said to the warriors. They didn't understand the words, but they understood the meaning. Humanity had sent them a message, and it was written in the blood of their queen. The human fleet hit the Vrexian formation like a hammer. Sarah watched through the cell's viewport as destroyers materialized from faster-than-light transit, their weapons already firing. The Vrexians had been preparing to receive a diplomatic envoy. Instead, they faced a battle-ready strike force that knew exactly where to aim. Every weakness, every blind spot. All the intelligence Sarah had transmitted was being used to devastating effect. The ship lurched. Sarah caught herself against the wall, her broken ribs screaming protest. The Vrexian warriors in the corridor scattered, responding to combat stations' alerts. None of them spared her a glance now. They had bigger problems. She had maybe 10 minutes before the battle resolved one way or another. 10 minutes to find an escape pod or a way to signal her fleet. 10 minutes to survive. The corridor was chaos. Vrexian crew members rushed past, their voices raised in panicked clicking. The ship's organic systems were failing. She could see it in the way the walls dimmed, the way the bioluminescent circuitry flickered. The fleet's coordinated assault was targeting the command ship specifically. They knew their soldier was here. They were coming for her. Sarah moved through the confusion, her training taking over despite her injuries. Stay low. Stay quiet. Use the chaos. A Vrexian engineer rushed past, too focused on reaching her station to notice the human. A warrior squad ran by, weapons armed, heading toward boarding positions. They thought the humans would board. They were wrong. The human fleet wasn't taking prisoners today. Another impact. Closer. The ship's structural integrity alarms added their voice to the cacophony. Sarah found a command terminal still functioning. The Vrexian operator was dead, killed by falling debris. She pushed the body aside and accessed the system. The tactical display showed the battle in real time. 8 human destroyers against 2 Vrexian battle carriers and a dozen support vessels. The numbers favored the Vrexians. The execution favored humanity. The destroyers moved in perfect coordination, their weapons fire concentrated on critical systems. They weren't trying to win through firepower, they were trying to cripple and disable. Sarah understood. They wanted the command ship intact. Wanted the intelligence stored in its systems. Wanted evidence of the Vrexian invasion plans to present to the Galactic Council. Wanted their soldier back. She accessed the escape pod manifest. Most were already launched or disabled, but there was one in the royal section, near where the Queen's chambers would be. Reserved for the Queen and her inner circle. Probably still functional. The route would take her through the heart of the ship, through corridors packed with desperate Vrexians, through sections that were already venting atmosphere and leaking radiation. Her augmentation package could handle the exposure for a short time. The question was whether she had the strength left to make it. Sarah's broken arm hung useless. Her ribs ground with each breath. Blood soaked her makeshift bandages from the energy weapon burn. The reset cycle had been interrupted before completion. Her body was eating itself from the inside, burning reserves it didn't have to keep her conscious and mobile. She started moving anyway. The first corridor was clear. The second held 3 Vrexian warriors. They saw her. Raised their weapons. Sarah didn't slow down. She grabbed a fallen piece of debris, something crystalline and sharp, and threw it. The improvised weapon caught the first warrior in the throat. The other 2 fired. Sarah was already diving, rolling, coming up inside their reach. Her good hand found a pressure point in Vrexian anatomy she'd learned during interrogation. The warrior dropped. The third died when Sarah used its own blade against it. She kept moving. Each step was agony. Each breath a conscious effort, but stopping meant dying, and Sarah wasn't done yet. The royal section was sealed, blast doors designed to protect the Queen in case of emergency. Sarah laughed. The Queen was dead. The blast doors were locking in corpses. She found the manual override. Vrexian engineering favored redundancy. Every automated system had a mechanical backup. The door weighed tons, but the counterweight system was efficient. Sarah threw her weight against the lever. It moved. Slowly. Grinding metal against metal. The door opened far enough for her to squeeze through. The Queen's chambers were opulent. Crystalline walls carved with historical scenes. Bioluminescent art that pulsed with programmed patterns. treasures from a dozen conquered worlds. And in the center, the escape pod chamber. The pod was designed for the Queen's massive frame. Sarah would rattle around inside like a pebble in a box, but it would work. It would get her off the dying ship. She climbed inside. The controls were clearly marked. Vrexians believed in clarity. The pod sealed with a hiss of pressurization. Sarah strapped herself into the oversized seat and initiated the launch sequence. The pod dropped away from the command ship just as a human missile breached the primary reactor containment. Sarah watched through the viewport as the massive vessel tore itself apart from the inside. Explosions blossomed along its length. Secondary detonations rippled through adjacent ships. The Vrexian formation was collapsing. The battle carriers were trying to retreat, but the human destroyers had positioned themselves perfectly. Every escape vector was covered. Every tactical option eliminated. Sarah's pod broadcast her identification code on the human fleet frequency. A destroyer broke formation, moving to intercept. She recognized the hull markings. The Thermopylae. Her ship. Her crew. The recovery was textbook perfect. The Thermopylae's flight bay opened. Tractor beams guided the pod inside. Gravity plating activated as the bay repressurized. Sarah heard voices. Human voices. Shouting orders. Calling her name. The pod opened. Medical personnel rushed forward. Sarah tried to stand, managed 2 steps, then collapsed into their arms. Lieutenant Chen, someone was saying. A familiar voice. Commander Park. Her CO. Stand down, soldier. We've got you. The Queen, Sarah managed. Dead. Intelligence uploaded. Invasion plans compromised. We know. We received everything. You did good, Chen. You did real good. The interrupted reset cycle was finally catching up. Her body was shutting down whether she wanted it to or not. The battle? We're winning. They're routing. You gave us everything we needed to turn this around. Good, Sarah whispered. Then the darkness took her again, but this time it was safe. This time she was home. Sarah woke in medical bay 60 hours later. The first thing she saw was Commander Park sitting beside her recovery pod, reading casualty reports on a tablet. The second thing was the commendation medal sitting on the table beside her. The third was her new arm.
They grew you a replacement,
Park said, noticing her attention. Organic synthetic hybrid. Better than the original. You'll need physical therapy to integrate with your augmentation package, but the doctors say you should be operational in 3 weeks. Sarah flexed the fingers. They responded smoothly. She could feel feedback, sensation, everything normal, plus some additional features she'd need to explore. The battle? Total victory. We destroyed both battle carriers and captured 12 support vessels. The Vrexian invasion fleet withdrew to their home system. Intelligence estimates it'll be years before they can mount another offensive, if they try at all. Casualties? Park's expression tightened. We lost the destroyer Achilles. 162 crew. Another 200 wounded across the fleet. But it could have been thousands. Would have been thousands if you hadn't gotten that intelligence out. Sarah processed the numbers. Felt the weight of them. Every name would be read at the memorial service. Every family would receive the notification. War had costs. She'd known that since basic training. The Vrexian Queen, Park continued. When they recovered her body, they found something interesting. She was carrying eggs. Genetic analysis suggests they were the last of her line. You didn't just kill their military commander, you ended their royal dynasty.
I didn't know.
I know. The Vrexians are calling it an atrocity. The Galactic Council is calling it legitimate combat action against a hostile military target. Politics. Park set the tablet aside. What matters is that you survived. Against poison, torture, impossible odds, and your own biology trying to shut you down. The medical team said you should be dead 5 times over. But I'm not. No, you're not. Park leaned forward. I need to ask you something, Lieutenant. When you were down there alone, outnumbered, injured beyond any reasonable ability to fight, why didn't you surrender? Why keep pushing? About those final moments in the Queen's chamber. About the choice between giving up and giving everything. Because surrender meant they won, she said finally. Meant our fleet walked into an ambush. Meant the invasion succeeded. Meant everything I'd trained for, everything I'd sacrificed. Didn't matter. She met Park's eyes. I couldn't let that happen. Not while I was still breathing. Park nodded slowly. The brass wants to promote you. Make you a poster girl for the war effort. The soldier who killed a queen and saved a fleet. Good for recruitment, good for morale. I don't want that. I told them you'd say that, so I made a counteroffer.
Park pulled out a data chip.
New assignment. Deep reconnaissance. Solo operations behind enemy lines. Exactly what your augmentation package was designed for. High risk, high value, no publicity. No speeches, just you, the mission, and whatever you need to make it work. Felt its weight in her new hand. When do I start?
After physical therapy and psychological evaluation. Standard protocol for what you went through.
Park stood. Take the time, Chen. Process it. Talk to the therapists. Let your body heal properly this time. Sir, did medical get data on what happened when I interrupted it? Park's expression darkened. They did. The damage was catastrophic. Your cellular structure was tearing itself apart. Another few hours and your organs would have started failing. The augmentation package isn't designed to be pushed that hard. But I survived. You survived. Because your crew risked everything to pull you out in time. Because the Thermopylae broke formation in the middle of a battle to recover you. Because people gave a damn about bringing you home. Park's voice softened. You're not invincible, Lieutenant. You're enhanced, trained, and tougher than hell. But you're still human. Remember that. After Park left, Sarah lay in the recovery pod and thought about what it meant to be human. The Vrexians had defined it as weakness, fragility, something to be conquered and controlled. They'd been wrong about that. Wrong about everything. Humanity wasn't strong because they couldn't be broken. They were strong because they chose not to break, because they adapted, endured, fought back even when logic said surrender was the only option. Sarah looked at her new arm, at the commendation medal, at the data chip containing her next mission. She thought about the 163 names that would be read at the memorial, about the families receiving notifications, about the cost of survival. Then she thought about the alternative, about human colonies under Vrexian occupation, about an invasion fleet rampaging through settled space, about all the lives that would have been lost if she'd surrendered in that cell. The cost was high, but the alternative was unthinkable. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked onto the bridge of her new assignment, a stealth reconnaissance ship, skeleton crew, equipped for long-duration missions in hostile territory. The captain was a veteran named Rodriguez who'd reviewed her file without comment and accepted her onto his crew without question. But I know the type. You'll be gone for months, maybe years. You'll see things that'll give you nightmares. You'll do things that'll make you question who you are. Yes, sir. One piece of advice, Lieutenant. When it gets bad, and it will get bad, remember why you're out there. Remember what you're protecting. Remember that every mission you complete is one less threat to the people back home. Somewhere out there, the Vrexians were rebuilding, planning, adapting to the new reality where humans weren't prey. Other threats were waiting too. The galaxy was vast and hostile and full of species that saw humanity as weak. They would all learn the same lesson the Vrexians had. The hard way. Because humanity didn't ask for these wars. Didn't seek conquest or domination. They just wanted to be left alone to build their lives and raise their families and explore the stars in peace. But when threatened,
When pushed, when forced to fight,
humanity fought back. And they didn't stop until the threat was eliminated. Sarah Chen felt her new arm, flexed the fingers that were hers and not hers, carried the weight of 163 names in the memory of a queen who'd underestimated what one human could do. Then she turned toward her station and prepared for the next mission. Because somewhere out there, another enemy was making plans. Another threat was emerging. Another species was about to learn what happened when you poisoned a human soldier and expected them to die quietly. They were about to learn what the Vrexians learned. What every enemy of humanity would eventually learn. Humans didn't break. They adapted. They endured. They fought. And when you pushed them far enough, when you threatened what they loved, when you gave them no choice but to fight back with everything they had, they won, no matter the cost, no matter the odds, no matter what it took. They always found a way, and that, Sarah Chen thought as the ship jumped to faster than light, was what made humanity special. Not augmentation packages or advanced weapons or tactical superiority, the simple, stubborn, magnificent refusal to give up. The Vrexian queen had watched them fall, had seen Sarah collapse, had thought she'd finally broken the human spirit. She'd been wrong, because Sarah hadn't fallen in defeat. She'd fallen in victory, had completed her mission and saved her fleet and eliminated the threat before her body finally demanded its due. The Queen had watched them fall, but she hadn't lived long enough to see them rise again. Stronger, smarter, more determined than ever. That was the lesson. The one the galaxy would learn ship by ship, battle by battle, war by war. Humanity could be poisoned, captured, wounded, pushed to the absolute edge of survival. But they couldn't be defeated. Not while a single human drew breath and chose to fight. Not ever. The stars blurred past as the ship accelerated. Sarah Chen checked her equipment, reviewed her mission parameters, and prepared for whatever came next. Ready to adapt. Ready to endure. Ready to prove once again why humanity belonged among the stars, no matter who tried to stop them.